The gifts of God are irrevocable. When God gives, He does not take back. It is a gift forever. Our Lord gives a young man the grace of a religious vocation. Go, sell all that you have and give to the poor. Then you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. Christine Niles and Michael Voris decide, no, someone we don't like helped this young man in realizing his vocation. We don't care if our articles slandering him prevent him from living according to the grace our Lord has chosen for him to receive, by convincing a bishop to deny him canonical status that he might have otherwise granted him. What's important is that we teach his friend a lesson. In June of 2020, Father John Melnick and I moved to St. Petersburg, Florida to found a new traditional Augustinian religious community, the Oblates of St. Augustine. Many of you became supporters of us even then, from knowing either of us online. We did this because the bishop responsible over the community we belong to, the Society of St. Augustine, forbade the community to receive any more vows. This meant that I had to leave when my temporary vows expired. This was because the bishop was concerned that there was no liturgical unity. In other words, the bishop was not pleased that Father John was offering the traditional Latin Mass 3 days a week, which drew myself to the community and was beginning to draw other candidates. In January 2021, Father John sent an email to Archbishop Vigano through a trusted mutual, asking if he would be willing to ordain me to the priesthood. Father John never received a response. We then went to visit Bishop Gracida. He said he could not ordain me to the priesthood without a demissorial letter from my canonical superior, and he refused to act contrary to canon law. Since the Oblates of St. Augustine were only a de facto association, a letter from Father John would not have been sufficient. I needed a letter from a bishop with ordinary jurisdiction. However, he personally contacted Bishop Parks of the Diocese of St. Petersburg, asking if he would erect us as a community and ordain me. Bishop Parks told him that he didn't need any more priests, but that he knew the Diocese of Venice, just south of him, was looking for more priests, and would put us in touch with their judicial vicar. About a week or so later, the judicial vicar of the Diocese of Venice in Florida called Father John to ask a few questions. Father John said they seemed to be looking for priests for Hispanic ministry, and seemed to become disinterested when they learned we wanted to exclusively use the traditional Roman rite. We had considered some land in northern Idaho. I contacted a priest in that diocese who would be willing to help introduce us to the bishop, but he was unable to help due to the sour taste the bishop had in his mouth of the traditional Latin Mass. We learned of a group of Benedictines who were selling their monastery in Opelousas, Louisiana. I had a phone interview with the vicar general, which seemed to go pretty well. They stalled in giving us permission to buy the property, but instead gave permission to a group of sisters. I asked if we could get permission anyway to move to the diocese, and I was told that I had to find a property first and get a nihil obstat for that specific property. I asked, if things fell through with that property, would we still have permission to get another? He said that I had to reapply for permission for each individual property. We got the hint. I asked a friend from the Diocese of Tyler, Texas, if he would approach his bishop about us. He said that he did on 2 occasions, and the bishop was uninterested. It came time for us to move from the place where we had been temporarily living. Father John had met Archbishop John J. Humphreys of the Old Roman Catholic See of Carglaw in the mid-90s, when on a mission from the Fraternity of St. Peter to locate all of the illicit traditional Latin Masses in the southeastern United States to prove to Rome that there was actually a pastoral need for the Fraternity of St. Peter in the United States. Father John and Archbishop Humphreys became great friends, calling each other frequently. Father John visited Archbishop Humphreys at least once a year, if not twice a year, until his death. Archbishop Humphreys even made Father John an honorary canon with their group in 2005. Close friends for over 20 years, Archbishop Humphreys offered Father John and the community he was founding a place to stay at their seminary, free of rent and utilities. We were deeply appreciative of this offer and took him up on it, but were also determined to find a diocese and not to overstay our welcome. We launched our fundraiser/raffle in April 2021, which ended in June 2021, and found a reasonable property in western Missouri. We moved from Florida to Missouri in September 2021. Between the start of our new community in June 2020 and November 2021, Father John had been spending a month at a time with priest friends in Louisiana to offer me a bit of relief and to find good doctors. In 2015, Father John had been diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. His hope was that, this new community would be able to care for him until his death. I was personally determined to do it alone if that's what would happen, and thanks to Christine Niles, a church militant, it did. When Father John left for Louisiana in October of 2021, he would be there for the unforeseeable future due to his health and his doctors being down there. I then made first contact with Bishop Johnston of the Diocese of Kansas City, St. Joseph, after which several cordial emails ensued about erecting the Oblates of St. Augustine in his diocese. In November 2021, Christine Niles and church militant accused my friend Mike Parrott of Restoring the Faith Media of keeping or wanting to keep the money he had raised for the legal defense of Father James Jackson, FSSP, and to do an investigation regarding his accusation. Michael Voris called him a profiteer. Since this wasn't true, the only way they could substantiate their hit piece was to find another fundraiser he had helped with in the past and make it believable that he had profited from that too. Mike had helped me make a quality video for our fundraiser that previous April. Church militant saw this and decided to accuse me of giving Mike money. I posted a screenshot of the bank account holding all the money with not a penny spent, and they changed their accusation to be that I'm a fraud because I might give Mike money in the future. Meanwhile, Mike spent tens of thousands helping us renovate where we live, as well as selling his own beautiful home to buy something far less practical for his family, to provide a place for Father John and I to start a monastery. Father John was in Louisiana at the time, and because the Eye of Sauron was now on our little hilltop, I told Father John that he needed to stay in Louisiana until further notice to protect his much-needed health insurance. If church militant decided to contact his diocese and cause a storm, ultimately, Father John could have lost his pension and health insurance, or my ability to care for him 24/7 for free, all of which he needed desperately due to his pulmonary fibrosis. Emails continued between Bishop Johnson and myself, and church militant sued Mike of RTF after he showed their emails and texts to him on a YouTube video. Bishop Johnson asked me to write a formal letter describing the background of our community, as well as other specific details. I concluded the letter requesting a personal meeting. He responded by threatening me with canonical sanctions after he had been informed of additional information regarding our fundraiser about which he was greatly troubled and perplexed. Of course, he never gave me an opportunity to defend myself against any accusations to ease his troubles and perplexity. Nevertheless, the only questions raised publicly about our fundraiser originated from church militant, and only to substantiate their baseless claims against RTF. The baseless claims church militant made against RTF and myself thus resulted in the denial of canonical status for the Oblates of St. Augustine. When I published that Bishop Johnson had denied us because of our desire to preserve tradition, Christine Niles took to Twitter to argue that the real reason was because of our fundraiser, and insinuated that Bishop Johnson had validated their accusations against us in their article. Nevertheless, Christine Niles and church militant gladly admitted that Bishop Johnston denied us canonical status due to their accusation fabricated to pretend to have reason to believe Mike of RTF would keep money from his fundraiser for the legal defense of Father James Jackson. What's worse is that in Michael Voris' deposition for their lawsuit against Mike of RTF, Voris admitted under oath that he never had any reason to believe Mike of RTF would keep any of the money, further proving that the accusation against the Oblates of St. Augustine was fabricated for you, the public, to believe that church militant had a reason to believe that Mike would keep some of the money. Our Lord gives a young man the grace of a religious vocation. Go, sell all that you have and give to the poor. Then you will have treasure in heaven. And come, follow me. Christine Niles and Michael Voris decide, no, someone we don't like helped this young man in realizing his vocation. We don't care if our articles slandering him contradict what our Lord has decided for this young man's life, convincing a bishop to deny him canonical status that he might have otherwise granted him. Most important is that his friends suffer. Church militant prevents priests and religious from responding to the grace of a vocation that our Lord has given them. Because church militant had canceled my vocation in the institutional church, Father John resigned himself to finding another way for me to realize my priestly vocation. Father John had earned a licentiate from the Pontifical College of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome in priestly formation and spirituality, had been appointed novice master and prior in the Order of St. Augustine, as well as rector of their seminary, St. Joseph's Seminary in Toronto. He had been the Master of Ceremonies of Cardinal Ambrosic of Toronto, appointed to the Ecumenical Committee in the Archdiocese of Toronto for relations with Old Catholics and Polish National Catholics, as well as an English-speaking secretary of the Pontifical Commission of Ecclesia Dei under Paul Augustine Cardinal Meyer. Father John told me on more than one occasion that if I didn't have a vocation to the priesthood, then neither did he. And it was he, Father John, that told Bishop Drew Meikle, a former seminary student of his, that I was prepared for ordination to the presbyterate. And Father John told me that I should go to him if he were to pass. Obedient, therefore, to my spiritual father of 8 years, founder of the Oblates of St. Augustine, and superior until his death, I announced my ordination to the sacred priesthood on April 1st, 2023, by Bishop Drew Meikle of the Old Romans Cariglow, in order to preserve the traditional liturgical life of the Catholic Church, as well as the Augustinian charism, in this unprecedented time of doctrinal, moral, and liturgical crisis. People can quickly become resistant to an idea or an institution or group with whom they have no familiarity. With the impressive credentials of Father John, his 20-plus years of friendship with Archbishop Humphreys and Bishop Meikle, and his devotion and fidelity to me as his spiritual son, I found it impossible to distrust his decision. Father John would not have let me be ordained by someone who wasn't absolutely certain was valid. And don't be deceived by the word old or Old Romans. It refers only to a line of apostolic succession, not a doctrinal creed shared among different groups who use the same words in their name. In fact, Bishop Meikle is not affiliated with any other group that does. These uncertain and unprecedented times in the Church require men to take bold risks for the preservation of the traditional Catholic faith. May our Lord grant you the grace to discern and know his will.